This series is called The 8 Business Imperatives. We've reached the 8th business imperative today. This is the final one of this series. And we've been looking at key business initiatives in detail to understand what it takes to get there. And today we're going to look at something pretty critical on everybody's minds at the moment about creating the future workplace. So please submit your questions via the special Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, not the chat function. You can type in your name if you wish to be identified, and we'll run through some questions later. But before that, I'd like to introduce our guest disruptor for this morning. So to look at creating the future workplace and to think specifically about how to create workplaces that work and work for everybody, and also to think about what the office is or should be. I'm really delighted to have Allison, CEO at Tech Mums, join us as our guest disruptor today. It's lovely to have you with us, Lauren. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Cool, fantastic. So we're going to have a bit of a chat for a bit. Please do, for those of you listening, if you have any questions, do pop them in the box, and then we will be able to run through those. But let's talk a little bit about Tech Mums, I think, to start off with, Lauren, because your aim at Tech Mums, I suppose, is to break down a particular digital divide by helping to skill mums in technology. Would that be fair to say? And why mums as well?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Tech Mums designs programs and initiatives that really work to get mums to feel more familiar, confident, and excited about the use of technology in their lives. The why mum question is a really great question. And that's because we see them as force multipliers in society. When you have contact with a mum, you don't just have contact with her, but also her children, her partner, her wider society, her parents as well. And Tech Mums was really founded, it was founded by Professor Sue Black. And what had actually happened was, I think it was around 2011, 2012. A government minister had said that children under a certain age wouldn't be able to learn how to code. She decided that was rubbish, and to prove them wrong, she set up some coding classes. And at the end of those, she saw that when the kids were showing all of the coding that they'd been doing, the dads jumped right in and the mums stepped back. At the same time, she was looking at some research that said that the biggest impact on a child's literacy and numeracy skills was the education and experience of their mother. And so she kind of compiled all of this together, and there's a couple of different things that Tech Mums works to address. We have a digital skills gap in general, globally and in the UK. We have children who need to learn to be digitally fluent. A lot of them are digital natives, but the understanding that goes with that as well. And they need to be supported at home with their homework. They need to have inspirational role models that work in tech, that can inspire them and support them in their journey as well. We also have, when we look at as well, return to work parents and return to work moms, the digital skills gap, it impacts women more than it impacts men. And so when we're looking at that, and mothers who sometimes will have taken breaks, career breaks for children, for other caring responsibilities, etc., there's a need to retrain and rebuild confidence up so that mums can return to work. So that's why we focus on mums. We do just see them as kind of this force multiplier. You want to have the biggest impact as possible, work with mums.
Excellent. And as you say, I think the term force multiplier is fantastic. I think that's a wonderful way of looking at it. And you've mentioned some of the benefits there. And also, I think another driver of a digital divide in children is how their parents use technology at work as well. So if your parents don't use technology at work, I mean, you can be less likely to be confident as children. So clearly, lots of benefits there. You talked about getting mums, back to work, and those return to work after a career break, which can be a tricky time. What has some of the work at Tech Mums taught you and informed you, I guess, about how the future workplace ought to look?
So pre-COVID, post-COVID. So when we were looking at it before, we work with a lot of different organizations in helping them sort of understand, how do you make your workplace more inclusive? How do you make it more diverse? And that isn't just in how do you hire people that are different from your current workforce. It's also about retention, it's about promotion, progression, and having those routes throughout businesses. So that has been something that we had worked and focused on quite often, and also had provided a lot of courses, in-person clubs to help mums retrain and build confidence back up to return to the workforce. So that's what we'd sort of been focusing on. Now with COVID, when we look at the future of the workplace, we're about to enter, it's not a new normal, it's a new unknown, right? Every 2 to 3 months, we're going to have something different that we're working towards, or we have to go back. I was talking to a business owner yesterday who said one of their employees was still stuck in March COVID and wasn't in July COVID, in terms of their stress levels and being able to navigate the online systems and things like that as well. So we're going to have this stage where we have mass unemployment, we have people who need to retrain. Everything that we had been working towards at Tech Mums has just accelerated, and the need is even greater, right? So how do we look at that and go, how do we navigate this next period of time to make sure that it is even more inclusive? Because I think there's a real risk right now that a lot of business leaders will assume that everybody is online, that everybody knows how to use Zoom, that everybody is comfortable working from home. Just because we've been doing it for a while doesn't mean that it's working. There is going to be more and more burnout from people working at home as well. So it's how do you actually change and pivot that and make sure that you are building a workplace where it's going to be productive. You're going to have low levels of stress for your employees, because stressed employees are sick employees, they're stupid employees. They make a lot of mistakes when you are stressed. And I think right now would be a very good time for any business leader to check in with their employees and see how things are going. Are there bits of this panic mode that we went into that are good and helpful in the new workplace, or are there things that are actually adding stress to them? Is there something that they can remove? Because we're also going to go into this hybrid model now, where we have some employees back at work, some still working from home. We're going to have rotated hours, childcare. That is going to change, and it looks like it may even change on a weekly basis. What your childcare challenges are, what your childcare needs, caring needs as well for other members of the family as well. So I think that's really important for business owners to look at right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, I suppose some of what you're describing sounds to me like work and home life has fused in a way, or the boundaries have blurred in the last few months, in a way that I think has probably affected women quite significantly. I've had quite a few calls with kids in the background, and my own have popped in. Do you think that there are kind of imbalances in that sense, in what you've seen over the last few months, where perhaps women have, women have maybe been adversely affected, specifically, whether mums or not, perhaps?
Yeah, I think there was an article out, I think last week, that said that, during the pandemic, women have had the majority of the caring responsibilities and the housekeeping responsibilities, etc. Even before COVID, the primary caregiver in the UK, I think it's 60% is a mother. So it, no doubt that has had a massive impact. That's not to negate the impact on fathers as well, because everyone is juggling here. But it has adversely affected women. And I read an article a couple of weeks ago about a working mum who realized that she was going to have to stop in order to look after her kids. And it wasn't something that she'd ever anticipated. And she's in a situation now where, she is going to have to stop, On the flip side, you also have mums that now, if their partner or they may be single mums, or their partner may have lost their job during the pandemic as well, is trying to juggle all of that at the same time. So yeah, it's a massive impact. And I think what it could do is, in terms of progress we were making, could drag us back a bit.
It could. I guess on the other hand, this is a really good opportunity for employers as well, because another sort of piece of feedback that we've had, and I'm sure you've had, is that the fact that kind of work and home life has fused has broken down some barriers as well. So thinking positively, I guess, what do you think employers really need to do to kind of grasp this moment and use it to create perhaps a better workplace, and one that works for everyone, and one that takes into consideration caring responsibilities that everyone has, mothers and fathers.
Yeah, I think one of the silver lining great things to come out of it is, we've always said that 9 to 5, Monday to Friday doesn't have to be the way a company is run, right? And we've been massive advocates for flexible working, for remote working. So it's kind of like great to have that point proven. And so I think that's a really good element. But I think business leaders really need to sit down and look at what is making their employees productive. What is supporting them? What are the ways in which they can change schedules or, phone call times or whatever it is, to make sure that they're latching onto that and actually making the best use of that as business leaders and also as humans as well. One of the things I think that is good for business leaders to check in as well is you maybe had a normal weekly call at a certain time that probably will now clash with childcare challenges. So how do you change that? Also, just because Zoom is there or your video conferencing software is there, it takes a lot cognitively to focus on a video call, and to be able to judge, and there's a lot about Zoom burnout, things like that. So maybe switch every so often to a walking phone call, or something a little bit lighter, so you're lowering that cognitive load. I've worked remotely now for 5-6 years, and the pandemic months felt like pandemic years in terms of just the exhaustion of being on video calls all the time. So I think that's really important as well. And I think it's really understanding that we don't need to be stuck in this rigid, this is the way the financial system works, this is the way, corporate this works, things. There's a lot more creativity when people have a lot more freedom over how they approach their work and their time.
Absolutely. I guess one of the things that can enable that creativity, though, are tools. And this is where Tech Mums, I think, absolutely comes into its own, because it recognizes, and you've mentioned the word humans, it recognizes that, that there's humans and technology, but it's this more human approach to technology. And yet the workplace is becoming more and more technologized. And I think we frequently hear stories from our community, actually, that user adoption of technology within the workplace isn't as fantastic as I think many leaders would like it to be. Often people rely on Excel. Excel comes up pretty much all the time, or they find their own workarounds, despite this sort of great piece of technology that's been implemented. I know this is a slightly different, sort of different thing, but how, based on what, your work at Tech Mums, where you are driving user adoption of technology in a specific way, what advice would you have to organizations struggling with this sort of ever greater technologization of the workplace?
I think the key there is not to assume. Don't assume that everyone has the, whether it's, I'll be honest, Excel is my nightmare. It's one I always, no matter how much time I spend on, struggle with. But don't assume that everyone is at the same level. Don't assume everyone has the same technology as well. At Tech Mums, we run Tech Mums clubs, and they are 10-week programs that run from the basics of getting an email, staying safe online, looking out for your kid online, also then takes you through how to manage your money online, get a job, retrain, and then the basics of app design, web design, and coding. The way we've designed our content is that it is in-person guided learning, but it is through technology. So we have an online learning platform, and mums meet in a group of 10 to 20 mums with facilitators, and they go through the content, talk together, and just build up that both self-confidence and tech confidence, because our biggest marker is in self-confidence throughout the program, which is really fantastic. And when COVID hit, and we found out we're going into lockdown, loads of people were like, oh, just put it on a Zoom room. And so it doesn't just work like that. You can't just go, oh, we'll just put something online, or we'll just throw it up there, because we're targeting mums who maybe 4 weeks ago didn't have an email address, and all of a sudden we want them to download Zoom, navigate between Zoom and an online platform, then all of the content, some of the content is on paper, trying to navigate all of that as well. I mean, a lot of like people say, well, our business is completely online, so we should be able to do it for this. And yes, there are certain things you can do online, but you need to think about your audience. What is their background, like their skill set? What is their technology? Some of our moms didn't have access to Wi-Fi, didn't have a smartphone either. And there was this assumption that you could just all of a sudden do everything online, and that's not true. So you need to look at, it's not that it's not possible, but it's important that you do it in a way that's not going to knock confidence. I know myself, I have, however many technical difficulties, how many times have we been on mute when we're not supposed to, etc. And if you have users that are coming on to adopt a new technology and they're encountering these errors, they might blame themselves, and it knocks their self-confidence, rather than understanding, hey, actually this happens all the time, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff as well. And the other thing that, you touched on there is the human aspect of it. One of the things that kind of drove me crazy in people's responses to, turning things online, making things remote, etc., was this attempt to really technologicalize language and make it really high, not quite academic, but, loads of words where there could be one, and using terms that aren't user intuitive, they aren't human, they aren't human. With the Zoom invite, and this is one of my gripes, is it says one tap mobile. Like, what does that actually mean to a human? One tap mobile, does that mean I tap it and it opens up Zoom? Does that mean it tap it and it's a phone call? Does it mean that my video automatically plays? And it would take a couple of seconds just to write out if you would like to connect direct through your, etc., and actually just write out stuff. And I think that's really, really important, because a lot of organizations just miss that mark, and it really hampers user adoption, because it's, instead of saying like open up your browser, look at it and go, okay, open up the internet. That's the way people interact with it. One organization that gets that very, very well is Monzo, and they actually have a guide which I encourage people to look up on their language. So instead of assist, it's help. So it's like looking at the words that you use, and it's, in a age where we think that AI is smart when it sounds like humans, why don't we actually work as humans to stop sounding like robots? And I think that's really, really important. And patience, I think, is a big one, is patience, is having patience as well. I'm sure everyone has an example of someone that they have had to help over the pandemic with technology, and it's you have to really have patience and think, because we don't, if you're on this right now, you probably don't remember what it was like to not have technology or not understand how a browser works, etc. So think about it, come from it from a really human perspective, like tell someone to hit the icon and describe the icon. Things like that I think are really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, I think, that the language can change very quickly. That can be quite difficult and challenging for people, even if you consider yourself to be, pretty technologically adept. It's interesting that you've also picked out the example of Monzo, because that is an organization that is kind of digital to its core. So they've kind of understood that to exist like that they need to bring technology kind of and normalize technology, I suppose, and humanize technology. So I think that's incredibly interesting. We have a comment from Nick, actually, which I think is which speaks to a lot of your points. And Nick says, we can't have MS Office as the default work solution, and employers should be taking the time to think about applications that allow workforces to perform business functions in workflows, rather than just exchanging documents via email. I know email is critical, and it's one of the first steps to sort of getting people confident with technology. And I think the other aspect, and interested to get your thoughts on this, that Nick says is about using this opportunity to create better environments in the office that multiply creativity, offer different meeting experiences, and kind of enhance social interaction when humans meet in person, which inevitably, we will go back to some form of that. What's your response to that? Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do. I've had, the opportunity to meet up with people recently, and it has been very strange but lovely. Yeah, I think the hybrid nature of how we're going to go back to this is really important. We could have had this before. We could have had video calls for meetings, etc. And when someone, just like one person, is remote, it's very hard to incorporate them into the conversation. Say for instance that you're in a conference room and you have one person on video, it's always a little awkward. And I think that, Nick's point there, it's like, it's going to be really important to make sure when we're back and having social interactions in person, for those that are still not in person for, whatever reasons that they're unable to return to the workplace in person, is making sure to include them as well, because that is going to be a social interaction you want to wrap into, yeah. And I really like the point about MS Office, is it's fantastic as it is as well. I think this is all about disruption, and there's so many different technologies that you can bring in that will really, they are designed for creativity as well. I think that's really important to loop that in.
I just want to go back to something and to sort of get to the core of I suppose, why Tech Mums exist. And I think it might be a bit of a misconception about what the digital divide is, but there is a flourishing user experience community now, a new user research community, which is all about making services more user-friendly. And I think the government has done some amazing work. We applied for a passport online recently, and it was the most painless process I've ever had. It was phenomenal. So there's some amazing work to do that. However, is there a danger in thinking that if we just make everything simpler, that will solve these confidence issues? Because that's actually, in some ways, it's a user solution, it's a technology solution. But the work that Tech Mums does isn't just about simple, technology being simple, is it? It's more than that. What is sort of at the crux of instilling that confidence, do you think, in your community?
Yeah, I think it's not, it definitely isn't just about let's make things simpler. I think that's really, really important. But I think before COVID as well, people didn't really understand what the digital divide is. There is an assumption that we are all online, you can do everything, there's an app for that, like all of that kind of stuff. And I'm sure if anyone is on this phone call as well, or this video call as well, or listening to this, there is an assumption that, well, everyone's online. That's not the case. There's the confidence barriers, there's the skills barriers, there's the technology barriers. Like, look how many through, I think it's devices.now with the government, they went and actually had to get devices into people's hands. Like, people when schools were like, oh, just work off a laptop at home. Not everyone has a laptop at home, and not everyone has a spare laptop to do their own work, their partner also work, and their however many children also be on a laptop at the same time. So I think that that's really, really important. So I think programs like Tech Mums are essential. It's building that confidence up, it's building in those skills, and just that it's all of this stuff. Tech Mums always say anything that happens offline can happen online too. So that's the bad stuff and the good stuff. How do we make sure that you have the skills that you have offline to protect yourself online? And then how do we make sure that the technology is something fun, amazing, exciting that you can use to make your life easier? And then there's also then making sure that we're not designing things that are 100% online all the time. Like that passport example, that's great. However, if someone's grandmother or cousin who hasn't been online, etc., has to then apply for a passport, they're going to get left behind. They're going to be disadvantaged. That's going to increase socioeconomic issues. It's going to leave a whole portion of the population behind. And there's a real danger right now that because so much is moving online, that people are going to assume that everybody is online. And that's going to make the digital divide even bigger.
Absolutely. Every year we run our digital trends report, and in that, the top priorities are investing in technology to build great customer experiences. And every year, I think for the past 3 or 4 years, investing in training and in digital skills is actually one of the lowest priorities. And it's a real contradiction, because organizations need more digital skills in all sorts of areas. That's what they tell us. And yet, why do you think it is that training and investing in these skills is a low priority. It doesn't seem to make much sense to me.
I do think it's a misunderstanding, and I think it's a lot of assumptions. The people that are in charge of deciding whether or not there's going to be training, or whether they're not, that they might not have been in the position to understand what it's like to be in the digital skills gap, to find yourself there. They're also, it's that mindset of used to recruiting people like them that have similar skill sets, etc. So I don't think they see it. However, if you look at the statistics, and once again, this is pre-COVID, the amount of GDP we're losing because of the digital skills gap. Like I think it's 96% of all jobs at the NHS are going to require basic digital fluency. And that's a crazy amount. And if you're not investing in skills training, if you're not investing in retraining, if you're not investing in addressing the digital skills gap, both in your workforce and how you recruit, and sponsoring programs like Tech Mums, I'll put a plug in there as well, or engaging with organizations that understand what skills retraining is, you're making really, really disadvantaged, stupid economic decisions. It sucks to kind of focus on just the economics of it, but you're going to have less people to hire, you're going to have a less diverse workforce, which is going to impact your productivity, it's going to impact your product design, whatever you're focusing on, it is going to have a knock-on effect. There's a massive digital skills shortage in terms of, all of the organizations. If you look on a job board right now, there are so many jobs that require, full stack developers, look at all the different technical jobs, and there's not enough people to fill them. So if we're looking at that, if you want to be able to move at a quick pace as a business owner, and you haven't invested in building people up so they can do the jobs that you need to do, you're just slowing yourself down.
Yeah, absolutely. And be able to retrain into new jobs as technology moves so fast that we kind of need to pivot. Organizations need to pivot pretty quickly in terms of skills as well. There is time for some questions from the audience, and before we kind of go to those, with the respect to your work at Tech Mums, I mean, what do you feel has been some of the biggest successes for you?
So for me, when I look at what we did during the pandemic, we managed to pivot our clubs in 4 days to an online model. That was something that we were comfortable with, and we had different scenarios of like how it could go, and we had fantastic partners with us in being able to put that online. I think that is a massive success. However, the big successes for me are the successes of the mums themselves. We just wrapped up our clubs and did an assessment, and the mum's self-confidence went from an average of 4 out of 10 to an average of 8 out of 10. Their tech confidence went from a 4.5 to an 8 out of 10 again. We have mums who get in contact with us to say that Tech Mums found them at a place in their life where they had no self-confidence and they didn't know what they wanted to do. I remembered about 20 minutes before I got the phone call to let me know that I got this job, one of the board directors sent me a video of a mum at a graduation that day who said before Tech Mums she still had 4 kids, but she has 4 kids. Her partner had left her. She had no job, no skills. And after Tech Mums, she says she doesn't want to go into a job in tech, which is perfectly fine. But she said that her self-confidence had been built up so much that she went and applied for a job and was now providing for her kids and no longer needed to rely on her ex. And I think for me, those are the big successes are, hearing about one of the mums who's now a business analyst. She went from a Tech Mums program to Tech Up Women, which is another incredible program that Sue Black founded as well. So definitely look into that, and is now a business analyst. So it's like all of those stories for me, like as amazing as Tech Mums is as an organization, and the work is fantastic. And, we launched Tech Mums Online this month as well, which are online mini modules for mums to take at home. It's really the stories of the mums that are the major successes, so I'd really just encourage people as well with the Tech Mums Online. They are the types of modules that if you're, on Twitter or on Zoom, etc., probably won't be the most relevant for you at this point in terms of the levels that they're at. But what they are great for is sit down and grab a cup of tea with another mum that wants to go through it, and go through it with them, have that interaction, and be able to support them in getting onto Tech Moms Online and doing the learning. You know, sit down with your granny and go through some of the Tech Moms Online content, have conversations about it. You know, the managing your money one, you know, you can look through it and see budgeting apps and how that can help you kind of bounce back post-COVID and things like that as well.
And have you seen, just on one last point, a bit more demand for those kind of things? Because I suppose the digital world has, whether we like it or not, had to be adopted very quickly by lots of people that I think hitherto had been able to go into a bank in person and had been quite happy with that, or go and pay off their credit card in the store as opposed to kind of online. So has that opened up a new segment to you, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think so. I think as, you know, things like your passport situation are happening, there's more and more like the increased demand that we have seen in terms of the emails in our inboxes, and organizations reaching out to us that want to support people moving online. That is just skyrocketed. You know, there as we move more and more things online, there needs to be more digital skills and confidence building programs. You know, if everything is banking online, that's a world that is different from every single bank, and some banks are really great at putting up user guides and things like that, and some aren't. But knowing the basic principles of, you know, looking to see if it's a secure connection, you know, doing all the things that you would do offline. You know, you don't run down the street hopefully with your credit card in your hand, so you don't have your, you know, your credit card details just sitting on an email somewhere. You know, it's all of those different types of things are really, really important.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been excellent to talk to you today. Before I go, I'm just going to leave. This is a comment from Nick, and I think really this is for the future. It sort of goes back to your point about disadvantaging the virtual attendees because they're not in the room, and how we need to think hard about that, and what the solutions might be. I mean, that's a bit of an unknown. This hybrid kind of workplace that we're moving towards, where you perhaps do have more flexibility, you do have a mix of the virtual and the physical. I mean, that's going to be very interesting. You know, how do you sort of feel about how organizations can cope with moving to this kind of hybrid? Do you think there's going to be some bumps in the road?
I think we've sort of focused on at the minute is do your best, right? And that's fine. We've, like, you know, global pandemic, everything else in the world right now, you know, it has been do your best and best effort, and that was grand and fine. Now we need to do better, right? We're now in a crucial pivot point where what we do now will determine the future of the workplace, right? So how do we do that? I think with the hybrid model, I think there's gonna really need to be a pivot in what we see offices as, what we see conference rooms as. You know, like it's gonna be, make sure that there's a screen with someone there, make sure that there's a way to interact, you know, look up best practices in chairing meetings that are half virtual, half, you know, in person. Your facilitation skills are going to need to change, and I think there needs to be a lot of human reskilling in that sense as well, you know, and then also allowing for, if you are doing an in-person meeting with a virtual one, allowing for breaks for everyone, in person and not, because there could be childcare stuff at the back, you know, you can't do it all day long meeting, but also just to have more human breaks and, you know, more social elements as well, to make sure that everyone's feeling included as well.
Excellent. Lauren, thank you. I think that's a really interesting point to end on, because this is the next few months, and as you say, there will be some challenges and some changes to practice of this sort of physical virtual world, which as you say has accelerated tremendously in the last few months. But I really want to thank you. The work at Tech Moms is really inspiring, and I'm really glad that you've been able to share some of those stories with us today, and a reminder to our members and people watching that a lot of these issues, you know, this isn't just about mums really, this is much broader than that, and these sort of issues with confidence and technological adoption really go to the core of workplaces. Thank you so much for bringing that to life for us, Lauren. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.